Hey, good evening. It's Saturday, June 15th, and welcome back to Everyday Talk 24/7. As I'm sure you know, tomorrow is Father's Day. So I want to have a couple of thoughts about fathers tonight. And typically we talk about fathers leading and those sort of things, and yes, they must lead. But there's one component about being a father which I think is often overlooked. And we find it in Psalm 103. And it's this element, this issue of compassion. Notice what David says here in Psalm 103, verses 13 and 14. This is an area where he's talking about God's mercy and grace. He just told us that God doesn't treat us as our sins deserve, that he's pushed our sins away from us. And then to follow up on that, he says, as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed. He remembers we are dust. See what David is saying here. Fathers are to follow God and model compassion. And matter of fact, it's so much the way God designed it to be that God is able to use a good father as an example of God's compassion for us. See, there's nothing that can compare you or me, a man. Nothing can prepare us for being a father. I don't care how many books you read. I don't care who you talk to. I don't care how many videos you stream. I don't care how many times you replay it over and over again in your mind. When that child arrives, there's nothing to compare with that. Nothing to prepare for. It absolutely blows us away. But Psalm 103 gives us a unique component out of our experience that will lay the foundation for being a father that's going to bring honor to God. And that's the compassion that God has for you and me. This is so important. What is this compassion based on? Well, we saw it in verse 14. It's based on the fact that God knows intimately who I am. We don't have the God knowledge of our children, but we do know who they are, where they come from. We also have an intimate, thoroughly full knowledge of our child's weaknesses and his frailty. We see that. We know the mom and dad, what we bring to it. As we see them grow up, we see their struggles. We see that they failed, struggled, just like we do. So we have an intimate knowledge of them. And rather than use this knowledge to attack them, or to push them, or to correct them, what David is saying, we need to model the Father here. Do not treat our sons and daughters as they deserve, because God doesn't treat us as we deserve. And we're to have compassion for them. What does this look like? What does this mean? What does this mean, having compassion? Well, one of the areas, there are many, but one of the areas is conflict. Your children are born into a life of conflict, just as you and I were. And we have to be aware of that. Here's three areas, not exhaustive, but here's three areas. The first conflict is that they're an image bearer of God, while they're also stained with Adam's sin. That's a conflict right off the bat. God, they're made in the image of God. They're fearfully and wonderfully made, but they are stained with the sin of Adam, and they add to it. So that's the first conflict. The second conflict has to do with living in a world which is hostile to God's rule. The world was designed to be in harmony with God and his rule. But no, because of sin, because of the battles of good and evil, the world is not a safe place. So that's another conflict that our children have to deal with. And then finally, at least for this discussion, our children have the conflict of living with a father who sends mixed messages. We love them, but we're unkind to them. We're faithful one day, we're harsh and out of control the next. That's another conflict. So those three areas of conflict. The fact that they are created in the image of God, but they have the stain of Adam with them. The fact they live in a world which is in conflict, And then lastly, they have a father who's conflicted, even with the best of intentions. We have to have compassion for that level of conflict that our children face. Hey, Echo, you come to see us? You want to come up? Come on. You can come up. No, you can't make a racket. You can't make a racket. Good girl. She's being a little bit rusty. You can come up if you want to. Anyway, they have that conflict with us, and we have to have compassion for them. We have to be aware of what they're struggling with. We have to be aware of that conflict. It's huge. And we have to be compassionate about it, just like God's compassion with us. So how does this work out? What's the exact way that this happens? Well, here it is. In Ephesians 6:4, we read this passage, and it's designed to deal with the conflict that we have. Fathers, do not exasperate your children, or don't provoke your children to anger. Instead, bring them up in the fear and training of the Lord, the training and instruction of the Lord. That's Ephesians 6:4. So the first area about showing compassion is that we not provoke our children to anger. We be gentle with them. We use pleasant words. We must be aware that being a dad means conflict. We're turning them away from the wrong direction to the right direction. So we must be a voice of passion, compassion, and love, just as Psalm 103 says. Then the second area that we show compassion is that we're to nourish our children. The Greek word for bring them up is really the word for nourish. It means we're to nourish our children up. This means providing an environment where our children are valued, understood. There you go, Echo. Thought you might say hello. We're valued, understood, and raised in a way that brings out the unique person that they are, what God created them to be. This means that they will be known and nourished with compassion and intimate knowledge designed to cause them to flourish. This is what an image bearer is supposed to do, because they, in fact, are image bearers of God, crowned with glory and dignity. That's what Psalm 8 says. They are crowned with glory and dignity. God made them to rule over his creation. Each child is special. Each child is unique. And with a heart of compassion, we need to draw this out of them. Not treat them as cookie cutters. Not treat them as in an assembly line fashion. But value them. Take the time to know them. This is compassion. So that they know that they're understood. There's no more compassionate thing you can do than to let your children know that you understand what they struggle with. Not just correct them. Not just saying, don't do that. Not just saying, this displeases God, stop it or else. But understand what they struggle with. Because that's what God does with you and me. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord is compassionate with us. Let's model God's compassion in that way. Let's not look at the world's model. Let's show compassion to value these special children that God has given us. And that's the thought for this upcoming Father's Day. Thanks so much for being here, and Lord willing, we'll see you Monday. Good night.